I'll be honest, with this one, I'm a fanboy, like a massive one. Just for this video, I must have reread Berserk like 3 times alone. It is a masterpiece like none other. A manga, nah, scrap that, a piece of literature that rivals any and tops most of the popularly praised classic novels and novellas. I mean, there is a reason why it's the #1 rated manga of all time. It is that good, and there is such a platitude of reasons for it. Now, given the length of this video, I understand that some parts may interest you more than others, or you may want to take a break and come back to watch it at your own pace. Thus, I've broken it down into chapters for you. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Now, as much of a fan as I am, I have to admit that Berserk is not for everyone. Berserk deals with extreme adult themes and taboo subject matters. There is a good reason for parental advisory and 18+ to Berserk's name. If you go to your local bookstore and find the Berserk volume, they will all be covered in plastic foils, so the children can't skim through it. Nowhere else will you see so much nudity, sex, and violence as in this manga. Berserk shows a violent world with all of its aspects, hence these parts were as relevant as any other to make the story as believable as possible. So, what is Berserk about? It's about struggling. It's about enduring the hardships of fate that life throws at you. It's about surviving through it. It is about getting up on your feet when you're down. It's about creating your own fate. Yes, you've been there. You have experienced this struggle, to one extent or another. You have met people as you were growing up, adults surrounding you, or in adulthood, people who were great and cared, or at least you thought so. Those who you called role models, and those you called best friends, who made you feel special. Before you were betrayed, before they left you behind, before you lost trust, before you were left shattered in pieces, before you had to get back up and build yourself up again. Berserk is about finding people who you may not have clicked with from the get-go. You're all grown up now and build up a plethora of walls and defense mechanisms to reduce chances of being hurt. But they stuck by you, and you were able to be vulnerable again. Berserk is about hardship, but it's not about this shock factor. Not really. It's about prevailing. It's about moving on, growing up, and getting back up and up again as you make your way through life, evolving and getting stronger every time. Berserk is full of parallels that one can draw with themselves and people that one meets along the way. You have lived Berserk long before reading it, and this is why it's beautiful, unlike any other, and this is why it's the #1 manga of all time. Born in 1966, Kentaro was always interested in drawing and having his stories told. At the age of 10, he has written his first manga. By the age of 18, he was let go by George Morikawa from working as his assistant on Hajime no Ippo, the reason being that Morikawa had nothing to teach Kentaro anymore. 4 years after Miura enrolled into an art college of Nihon University, and having published a couple of unsuccessful one-shots, Miura has done it. He has written a one-shot called Berserk. That one-shot was instantly picked up to be serialized in 1989 by monthly Animal House. However, it was not yet smooth sailing for Kentaro. In 1992, only 3 short years after his debut, Miura was already faced with a hard choice. Imagine this: you have finally created something that is worthy, but something that is not yet critically acclaimed, something is not yet popular. You fought hard to get published, and now your publisher tells you that they are shutting down. Your fate in shambles, but you are given an offer to team up and work with the man whose work heavily influenced and inspired you to become what you are on a new project, or take a risk and seek a new publishing journal. This is exactly what happened to Miura in his young adulthood, at the age of 26, when his publisher, monthly Animal House, went out of business. He was at a crossroads and was offered to work with Tetsuo Hara, who has written Fist of the North Star, what was the face of manga in the 80s, and thankfully he chose the latter. His legacy would be of his own creation. Writing, drawing, and breathing Berserk into life was Miura's path. And god damn did Miura leave a tremendous mark on many mediums, such as cult classic video games, and other mangas and anime. Just to give you some examples of the games that Berserk has influenced, these are Final Fantasy VII and Cloud's oversized Buster Sword, Final Fantasy Tactics, Dragon Dogma, Devil May Cry series, and a very small indie series of games by a little known company called From Software, which published Dark Souls series and Elden Ring. However, Miura's health was declining, faster than anyone, and especially Kentaro, were expecting. In 2012, it was announced that Berserk was going to be on a big hiatus, and fans were going berserk, forgive me for the pun, from receiving a glorious chapter every month. They went on to receive a chapter once a year, and then once every now and again, with 4 to 5 months gaps in between. Just to put it into perspective, by 2013, Kentaro Miura has written 332 chapters, and from 2013 to 2021, he drew, wrote, and finished 31 chapters only. But in the end, Kentaro Miura couldn't win over his declining health. On 6 May 2021, at the age of 54, Kentaro Miura has died of aortic dissection. With 40 collected tankobon volumes and over 50 million copies sold worldwide, the story of Berserk was left unfinished forever. And despite this, even though Kentaro was never able to finish it, he has left a mark on the world. With a massive following worldwide, Berserk is the greatest manga and revenge story of all time. Since his death, the Wild West, that is the World Wide Web, was bombarded with discussion that spanned over a course of what felt like an eternity, but in reality was only one, but a very long year. Should Berserk continue without Miura? Should it be left untouched in his honor? When I first finished reading Berserk and read the end on the last page of chapter 364, for a solid month I was going through what can only be called turmoil. That cliffhanger ending left more questions asked than answered. I wanted more. I needed more of Berserk. It was a difficult month. Though eventually I was at peace. Berserk was done, a masterpiece that is unfinished, but one that was beautiful all the way through. Kentaro Miura is gone, and so shall Berserk be put to rest. After all, it is his magnum opus, and nobody else's. And then the morning of 7th June 2022 came along. I woke up and sat up to drink my cup of coffee and browse Twitter. It was then that the coffee went all over my screen. A discussion that circulated and got the fans to argue all over came to seize. Berserk will go on. Miura's best friend and an incredible mangaka in his own right, who has written Holy Land, will had Berserk's continuation. My day was made with a singular piece of this news. Berserk will be seen through to the end by the one person who has talked with Miura extensively in regards to its story. That found peace was no more. I need more Berserk still. And after reading the chapters 365 and 366 that were published on the 24th of June, I am sure that Kentaro's legacy was given into great hands. In this section, there will be minor spoilers of Berserk's early chapters, particularly Black Swordsman and Golden Age arcs, with caution given, be advised. Now then, Berserk explores a huge array of topics and themes: what it means to have free will, what is fate, causality of predestined events. Berserk delves into human resilience. The world is dark, and as such, many characters come from traumatic backgrounds, and these characters are what this world made them to be. They struggle against the injustice of the world. Guts, our protagonist, he struggles against destiny itself. Being branded for life, he is cursed to be destroyed and devoured by the monsters hiding in the dark and revealing themselves as the sunset fades into a grim, bleak night. But Guts gets up. He stands up again and again through his sheer will and brute forces his way into tomorrow. Griffith, on the other hand, who was once Guts' brother in arms, a rival and the closest thing that there is to a best friend, and is also in his way an embodiment of resilience. Griffith has always had a dream to have his own kingdom, and it's his resilience, maniacal egotism, and selfishness of his ambition that led to the consequences of his own making that is the darkest hour, that is, the eclipse. And this is what makes the two the perfect equilibrium of protagonist versus the antagonist. The series swim in human nature and the grayness that is human morality. The characters we follow page after page walk on the razor's edge between choosing to be good and falling into an abyss of evil and madness. Our protagonist, Guts, through the first 3 volumes of Berserk, is not likable. He is presented to be an anti-hero. He doesn't care about killing anything that stands in his way, humans or monsters alike. He is indifferent about saving people, or people aiding him along his way. His moral compass is long forgotten of such definitions as right and wrong. He bathes in the grey. He does not protect the innocent or the weak, nor does he pretend to be any kind of hero. But, as the story progresses through to Golden Age, which is perhaps the greatest story arc of all time, we are shown that Guts is who he is because of the many traumatic events of his past. Golden Age is a flashback into a time past long ago, and it starts at the moment of Guts' birth. I will avoid being graphic here, but trust me, the imagery and the events that Miura has written for Guts' backstory are nothing short of explicit and traumatizing, and these events had led Guts to be the deeply conflicted person that he is, who knows only the way of his sword. Human relations, camaraderie, and friendship are some of the other explored themes in Berserk. Being raised in a band of mercenaries, Guts did not know the warm touch of love. He had to fend for himself and earn his slice of bread from his very adolescence. With everything that he has went through, Guts was left with no trust in humanity at all. The pain he went through was branded so far within his soul that when he finally found a woman that embraced and fell in love with him, he couldn't let her touch him, as his memories came flooding back. However, during his time with the Band of the Hawk, Guts learned to form bonds, real friendships, and codependencies, maturing into a fine, happy individual. He has finally allowed himself to drop his guards and to feel and have fun with his friends. And there is a good reason for why this arc and Guts' time with the Band of the Hawk feel special. Every major and side character in the band feel alive. They have their own screen time, their own motivations, goals, and identities. And the reason for this is that Miura based the Hawk on his real-life high school friends and his real-life experience with people. The theme of friendship is consistently strong throughout the manga, but it has ties with and leads to the themes of ambitions, blame, and accountability. As such, through friendship, Guts' ambitions were elevated. He overheard Griffith once say that to him, what he considers a real friend is his equal. Guts loved Griffith as a brother and wanted to be considered a true equal and a true friend to the man who in a way saved him and brought back his humanity. And as for Griffith, it is hard to say whether he truly loved Guts as a brother, but to him Guts was special. And it is his relationship with Guts that made him forget his dream, if only for a moment. After Guts has left on his journey to find his own dream and come back a different man, Griffith snapped. He has done something impulsive that left him to his demise. And I strongly emphasize this. Griffith, a man whose sole personality was tailored to further his ambition, his dream, his goal to see his kingdom come. Imagine what kind of torment that such a man will go through when he loses nothing short of everything that he is and what he wanted to build. In a way, Golden Age is really a Greek tragedy. Griffith's tragic downfall was one of his own making. A man who was never impulsive and always calculating, looking into the future of tomorrow and beyond. He could not deal with rejection. During his duel with Guts, he internalized, "If I can have you, I don't care." And indeed, he didn't, because what he has done thereafter, undone everything that he has built up until this point. But instead of holding himself accountable, Griffith, who is the embodiment of pride, internalized and agonized that his undoing was not of his own creation. Now, betrayal and revenge are perhaps the two main themes throughout Berserk. Guts, who suffered betrayal in his adolescence from the mercenary group that was the closest thing to a family he had. Then Griffith, in his own head, marking Guts to be the perpetrator and betrayer of his dreams, have come full cycle, and this is what led to the eclipse. Have you ever hated someone so much that this feeling alone will drive you to do horrific and impossible to grasp things? Have you ever loved someone so much you'd give an armful? Yes, literally, give an armful. Have you despised someone so much that your whole life was focused on finding that person and ripping them apart? Have you ever hated someone so much that you would forget about your humanity and purge it all just to grasp enough power for a single fraction of a moment, one chance to get your piece of sweet revenge? What will your eyes look like in that very moment? Will you be insane? Will you be terrified? Or happy? Or maybe satisfied? This is what Guts was left with after the events of Eclipse, and this is the Guts that we first meet during the Black Swordsman arc. Berserk doesn't start at the beginning. It starts well into Guts' journey, when he is a shell of who he was. It is very rare to find a story-heavy piece of literature where the first arc of the story ages like fine wine as you read further and delve deeper into the story. Typically the beginning is the least interesting part, but not in Berserk. Miura is a master of foreshadowing events that are yet to be revealed. Nowhere else will you be told the stories of sub-characters so bluntly and yet so discreet that you don't even notice. Characters that undergo such vast personal developments. Nowhere else will you receive such a platitude of emotional roller coasters that these characters experience. Here, no character is left shallow and without a story to tell. Kentaro explains everything, all in due time. Unlike many other stories where antagonists exist only to serve as a power-up training for the hero, in Berserk, every demon and human antagonist have their own reasons and goals. There is definitely a strong sense of mystery at first, with Guts' motives being hinted at very subtly, as he makes his way through these self-contained arcs. And thus, the final theme that I would like to talk about is existentialism. In Berserk, it is brought up quite often that the audience wonders why Guts continues at what seems to be a hopeless goal. A story that starts out with a number of small arcs featuring Guts hunting down demons known as apostles. We don't know why Guts kills these demons, we don't know his motivations, except from slight indications by Miura here and there. But there is a lot of history between Guts and these apostles. Now, there is so much more to talk about in Berserk and what happens in the story, but I'll be honest with you, it is very difficult not to spoil the story of Berserk beat by beat. Nor do I want to do that, as Berserk should really be made your own by reading it firsthand. Black Swordsman arc, Golden Age, Conviction, Millennium Falcon, and Fantasia are all superb in their own rights, touching low and high fantasy settings, from hell-like horror to elven forests and Eden-like gardens, with Cthulhu-esque cosmic horror and surrealism sprinkled on top. Berserk really has it all. By the end of the Eclipse and the start of the Conviction arc, the art slowly became some of the best and most detailed art in any manga, and I'm not overstating Miura's art. It is phenomenally beautiful to read and study, if you enjoy art, that is. I would go as far as to say that some of his panels really do deserve gallery-like exhibitions. Detailed beyond belief, hundreds of characters on singular panels, hectic battles and highly textured monsters that Miura would zoom in and edit on a pixel-by-pixel basis that are not even noticeable by the human eye. And my personal favorite, the fluidity of motion, where still panels come alive. Fluid, realistic, and clear fighting scenes. You feel the speed, the agility, swiftness with which Guts operates, and the momentum and the weight of Dragon Slayer that Guts wields. Characters' designs are great, and their facial expressions are also a marvel. Characters' expressions are very detailed and so rich that you never get bored. You can feel the difference between smooth and angelic appearance of Griffith and brute yet kind rectangular face of Guts, for example, the innocence of Elaine portrayed through her kid-like nature, and the little roguelike, adventurous nature of Isidro. Miura really put a lot of blood and sweat into his lighting and shading techniques in Berserk. You can see very distinctive nights that are contrasted by a ray of sunshine and sunsets, along with dynamic shadows that no anime director can mimic. It's simply sensational to look at, and gets even better by the superb equilibrium that Kentaro's writing adds to his work. It is hard to tell whether Miura drew this well and with such dedication to his craft due to innate perfectionism, or that he dedicated himself to create a masterpiece as his life's mission, which in turn fueled his perfectionism. But one thing is clear, Miura-sensei succeeded. On the other hand, unfortunately, animation just does not give justice to the source material. There have been 3 attempts to animate Berserk. The first series took place in 1997 and adapted into a 25-episode television series. And this one is the best, so to speak, and overall not too bad. This adaptation is quite fleshed out, that is, until it isn't. It was created to air on Japanese television, and thus was restricted with certain story elements. Given how brutal Berserk is of a story, this attempt skipped majority of savagery that happens to major and minor characters alike, that fueled their motivations and made them who they are, their reasons for the way they are, making them much too dimensional. And it skips over the most important plot points, for example Skull Knight, who is imperative with how things turned out during and after Eclipse. I would call this one a kid-friendly Berserk, which is literally what it is. But I wouldn't recommend it as an entry point, unless, as I mentioned earlier, you are a kid who really shouldn't be exposed to 18+ stories. The second was a trilogy of films. This trilogy was purely focused on the Golden Age arc. Let me just remind you here that manga-wise, Golden Age was collected in 11 volumes, 3 to 14, which is a total of 94 chapters. Now, on average, depending on the anime adaptation, it takes 2 to 4 manga chapters for one solid episode of anime. Let's take the average of 3 and divide 94 by 3. What you should get here is 31 episodes to cover all the material faithfully. With an episode being roughly 19 minutes each, we get 589 minutes, or rounding it up to 10 hours of watch time. Now, half that amount, 5 hours. 5 hours is the total airtime of the 3 films. You can imagine how squished that story is. This is Berserk the speedrun. And to play the devil's advocate here, if you're alright with CGI anime, it's tolerable. XD. It looks like a game in between PS2 and PS3 graphics. I would advise against it. It skips way over too many events and characters. The third was a second attempt at making Berserk into anime series in 2016. This time it was attempted to bring the world of Berserk to the world of anime with breakthrough progress in the marvelous technology that is CGI made in short 3 years. Its 2 seasons cover the cut-down Conviction and part of the Falcon of the Millennium arcs. Now, I really do not derive pleasure from saying this. This show is beyond terrible. Do yourself a favor and never watch this mess. CGI animation is bad, the characters feel still, emotions are lacking for a lack of a better word, and action sequences are just... And finally the sound. Gata's sword has one sound and one sound only. This sound is used for every single object that it collides with. It is beyond terrible. I'll leave this section by saying this. Maybe one day we will get a good Berserk anime, but that day is not today. And now, as promised, the cash money meter is finally here. Berserk is 31 cash monies out of 10 for me. This really isn't a case of you should read. It's a case where I implore you that Berserk, it's a must read. That is, of course, if you do not mind adult themes and taboo subjects being explored. Overall, Berserk is easily the best manga and the story that I have ever had the pleasure to read. Starting with well-developed and written characters, to the deep intricacies of its plot, there really isn't a better time to read it all at once in one swell swoop than at present, now that Berserk is officially continuing and will see its story through to the end under Koji Mori. I can count on one hand the amount of mangas out there that were able to captivate me in a similar fashion that Berserk done. It really is second to none, and I don't even need to read every manga in existence to tell you that. Now, since you had the time to join me and watch my very long review, then I'd say you should have enough time to open a new tab and read the very first few chapters of Berserk online. Trust me, you won't regret it. Go on, young struggler. As a final note, maybe your friends have been trying to get you to read Berserk for a while now, and you are now finally interested to committing to reading Berserk, thanks to my video. And maybe you're wondering where you should start. I tell you, you should start at the very beginning with the Black Swordsman arc, as Miura has written it. Do not listen to the people who tell you to start with the Golden Age. That is wrong. Also, remember how I said that Kentaro based the Band of the Hawk on his real-life high school friends? Well, Griffith in particular was based on Koji Mori, the man who is now in charge of Berserk, a man who will now carry on Kentaro's legacy. That's it. Now, if you have stayed with me until the end of the video, I hope you really enjoyed it. Please do like and subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and I will see you next time.